It's Movie Time is produced by John DeSando. Listen to shows and read reviews online at WCBE.org.
I'm John DeSando.
And I'm Kevin Carr.
And this is It's Movie Time.
And it is, are we ready for Armaggedon?
We are. First of all, we're recording this on November 8th.
Yes.
And this is already Armageddon.
Yeah, Armaggedon time.
So now we have a movie called Armageddon Time.
That's true. And it has nothing to do with asteroids hitting the Earth and sending up Bruce Willis with the best deep core drillers in the world.
But supposedly there should be a clash between forces, right? If we're going to have an Armageddon. So let's take the title.
Right.
What is the clash? What is the face-off between good and evil in Armageddon Time? James Gray's recollection of his 1980s youth in Queens. I don't know. Maybe we'll put that off till later.
I'm trying to avoid saying something overly pithy that will give away my review.
Yeah. I was thinking that because this is heavily Jewish, it's a Jewish family.
Yeah.
And I think they live in Flushing or somewhere, and they're middle class.
Yeah.
And that there's a subtle clash between them. And, well, between our protagonist, the young man, the young James Gray, really, and the societal forces that are they're leavening this racist bigotry.
Yeah.
And does that feel like the conflict?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not exactly sure the meaning of the title. I mean, it's a coming of age story, so it's a kid trying to find his own way.
Yeah. And
he's facing his not just the things in society and the racism and anti-Semitism that he faces in school, but he's dealing with the pressures of being a kid, Jewish or not, being a kid with overbearing parents. And his grandparents came over during World War II, escaping Nazism, so they know all this stuff firsthand.
Yes. But
he doesn't. He just, you know, he's born, I would assume, in the late 60s is when the character would have been born.
Yes.
So all of this he's just come to take. And of course, his grandparents, particularly Anthony Hopkins played his grandfather, does a great job, you know, coming down on what he thinks is right and wrong due to prejudice and that sort of thing. But you see the next generation giving into it themselves, even though they don't want anti-Semitism, which by the way, let me just say this, it's awful that we have to say that this is relevant today because there's been an increase in anti-Semitism. That's awful that that's happening.
Yes.
And I don't think that that's why this movie was made.
No, I don't think he had, I don't think he was trying to make that point.
Yeah, but ultimately the parents, even though they fight against anti-Semitism, and they have a problem with that, they fall into the traps of there's racial intolerance, there's racial bigotry, because he's got his best friend at school's black, and his parents don't want him hanging out with him because they think he's a bad influence, which is kind of a little dog whistle in itself. And on top of it, you have the parents using their influence in different ways to get what they need, which is where the breeding ground of privilege comes from.
Yes, yeah, and I think that what James Gray, the director, does with this, and the writer, and the writer, Gray, does, is subtly to show the forces that were going to take over this kid, and he's Paul Graff is his name, is the kid's name, played by Banks Rapetta. Really good job.
Yeah.
And so those forces that he has to give into when he has a natural inclination to be democratic and loving. Johnny, the only black kid in his school, representative of integration. Yeah. And
but also there is a real element to the fact that the kid comes from a broken home, and he does come from, for lack of a better term, the wrong side of the tracks. He is a bad influence on him. He gets the kid to skip school. You know, I mean, they
smoke pot.
Yeah, I mean, he does everything that they warn him not to do. But that's where it's like it's that because the sticky nature of society is sometimes stereotypes happen, and it may not be the fault of the people of the stereotype. There may be societal situations that put you in that, but you're still in that.
Oh yeah. I mean, you've got two parents, strong in their own way. You have Anne Hathaway playing mom.
Yeah.
She's the PTA president, and she's going to be running for the school board.
Yeah.
And you got Jeremy Strong playing. At best, he could be called a contractor. I think he's really a plumber, but
Yeah, he's like he's a home fix-up.
Yeah,
kind of guy.
But they do have a middle-class life, and they are capable of sending their first son to private school.
Yeah.
And then they have Paul in public school.
Yeah.
But the minute that they feel that this black friend of his is taking him the wrong path.
Well, I wanted to change. They're not like, oh, you're with this black friend in the black. It's just things happen. And then they blame the black friend rather than blame Paul.
Yes, exactly.
Which is a much more parental thing. That's a much more realistic parental thing.
And a sign of the privilege, because one of the devastating parts of this film is that Mr. Turtletaub, or whatever, the teacher, is picking on Johnny, the black kid. Yeah. And when it comes down to it, it is Johnny who gets it, not Paul. Yeah. And Johnny who gets,
well, don't give away anything. Don't talk too much about the ending.
No, thank you. Yeah. And no, I wouldn't. But you can see that very early on.
Well, and the thing is, the parents, it does show the perspective from the kids, where he thinks his mother's, they're like, is she the president of the school? And she's just the president of the PTA. Which is not a powerful position whatsoever. And even if she got on the school board, she'd be a junior member of the school board first timer. So her power in that school is exceedingly limited.
But it does seem to have some effect, don't you think? That
there's always political.
And you need to see Anne Hathaway in a different kind of role for her.
Yeah.
An unglamorous role.
Yeah, there's been less glamorous roles she's been in.
Right.
Like Les Miserables.
I know, but something a little bit less. I even think that's glamorous in a way. But
well, she won an Oscar for it. That's
yes. And Jeremy Strong playing a really good part here as Dad.
I would say he does a fine job in his performance. I'm not a fan of the characters in this movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's why I would say I wouldn't say it's a good part.
So do you think they lean towards stereotype or what?
I hated everybody except Anthony Hopkins.
No, well, really.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I thought the kid was a crappy kid. And he was not a good kid. His brother was a jerk and a bully. His family were terrible at what they did. Like, there's a scene early on in the beginning where they're having dinner and the kid doesn't want to eat the dinner, and so he's like, well, I'm going to order dumplings from the Chinese restaurant.
I know, yeah.
And they just acquiesce, and I'm like, well, that's just crappy parenting right there.
He just got the phone. He's going to order dumplings.
Yeah.
I think this is a different kind of privilege, but it's a privilege.
But I mean, it's like, that's the kind of, when the kid is just, you've lost control of the kid at that point. So when he does smoke dope, he was ordering dumplings earlier. That's the gateway drug, is the dumplings.
Yeah, and they lost my affection when they sent him to the private school. Immediately sending him to private school to get him out of harm's way.
Well, yeah, it shows the when you have privilege, you have the ability to pull somebody out of the situation you don't like.
Yes.
Rather than fix the situation.
Yes. It couldn't be any different with his little starched shirt and his pin-on tie.
And then and here's something, and this is not a political thing, but they have this little bit in the middle where he's at the private school, and you see Fred Trump, who's Donald Trump's
this is
father,
great.
And his sister, who's, I forget her name, but she was actually a judge appointed by
Yes.
She was appointed by both Democrats and Republicans. So
yeah.
But they have this thing.
Jessica Chastain's cameo.
Jessica Chastain plays. Well, I don't know if I call it a cameo.
What do you think?
It's in the trailer. It's not a cameo. It's like, oh hey,
one scene of a surprise, Kev. I think when you have you have a star like her, and then you have in one spot She does her speech and then she's gone.
Sure, okay.
I would still
we can call it a cameo.
Yeah, right.
But I felt that, to me, that was distracting because it brought you too into today's world.
It was.
Because if you would have made this movie 10 years ago, people would be like, who the heck's Fred Trump?
I know. I think she played Marianne Trump is her name in the
Yeah,
film.
yeah, she's what, his sister? And
you know what I love? I love the way they depict Trump, Fred Trump, coming out of the shadows as the kid's going to school.
Yeah.
And sussing him. I just love it. He's just like a dirty old man.
Yeah, I mean, I liked the section I thought worked well, but it was very jarring and this is, I think, where it gets to my issue with it being, every year we get these, and they're not biopics, but they're the type of thing where it's like, here's a story of what it was like for me growing up at this time, and it's either a writer or last year we had the Tender Bar.
Kevin, I've got to stop you. The only relief valve we have here is that people are going to be able to go to our podcast, Back Talk, to hear us talk more, blather on a movie even that Kevin doesn't really like, but he can talk about.
Yeah, you heard me ramping up. Go online and find out what I really have to say about this.